Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Better Call Sexton with me, your host, James Sexton. Before we begin, remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all those good things. It helps the channel and we appreciate it. Today, we got a full docket. The never-ending war of the sexes moves to its most daring battlefield, the tennis court. A French woman claims she has a human right not to sleep with her husband in a recent European court ruling. Has Gen Z entered a dating recession? And I tell you how to get those much sought after matches on all of your dating profiles. All this and more coming up today. Better Call Sexton. Let's get after it.
So, Jim, from People magazine.
Dude, by the way, you see, I'm not wearing a suit today. This is my non-lawyer costume.
I like it.
People don't know how to react when I'm wearing something other than a shirt and tie. I actually feel like if I go out in the shirt and tie, I'm instantly recognized by people and stopped by people. But if I walk around like this, people don't. I'm just another white guy with a pointy nose.
You kind of got like a Hugh Jackman, like Wolverine vibe going on, you know?
That feels like I'm getting glazed, but I appreciate it.
No, all right. Pause. So from our first story from People magazine, we have a very, very interesting, very funny story. I'd love to hear your take on this. Aryan Sabalenka, that's a hell of a name, promises to represent women's sport in the best way in the, quote, Battle of the Sexes match against Nick Kyrgios. You can tell it's tennis.
Oh, they're doing another one of these? Okay.
Yeah, so they're going to do a Battle of the Sexes tennis match. Want to note first that Sabalenka here is number 1 in the world, and Nick is number 656 of the men. So what are we thinking? Where's the money going?
Well, I mean, this was done before. This is like everything old is new again. Billie Jean King, I think, is the one who did it the first time. They made a movie about it with like Steve Carell or somebody in it. But yeah, I mean, look, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I think, contrary to often stated opinions, men's bodies and women's bodies frequently differ, and their abilities accordingly differ. That's why, you know, the record speed for the marathon versus the record speed for the women's marathon is completely different. It's also why they start the staggering times of the marathon at different times, because otherwise, when the women's winner was crossing the finish line, there would have been a colossal number of men who'd crossed the finish line. This is not to say that women can't be amazing athletes. It's just to say that, you know, the levels of physicality involved in a sport can often translate to, you know, to different performances by men and women. I don't think that that's something controversial to say. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, this is just going to be, the lead up to it is going to be an endless battle of the sexes of people talking about how, you know, girl bossing right into the sun. And then after, when in all possibility or likelihood, the male player is successful, it will not really have proven much of anything. Just like if he lost, it wouldn't really prove much of anything. If you wanted to do like a battle of the sexes, you would legitimately have her play one of the top 10 ranked players. And then you would actually get a sense of what's going on. But if you're putting someone who's in the 600ths of rankings up against the number 1 player in the world, what are you really testing? Are you testing that a woman can play tennis as well as the 600th best? Like, what would that prove if you are successful in it? I think all this stuff is just stunty stuff. Like it's just done to make a point that it doesn't actually make. And I don't think it's making a point that's in controversy. You know, there's a fairly well-known interview with, I think, Serena Jones, where she talks about, you know, her incredible accomplishments as a tennis player. And the host refers to, you know, how she's the greatest in the world. And she says, well, I'm the greatest women's player in the world. And I wouldn't want to play against men. Men's tennis is kind of a different sport in terms of the physicality of it. And I think that showed a tremendous amount of confidence in her abilities, but in honesty as well. I think, you know, her talents as a women's tennis player are through the roof. Her talents as a tennis player, period, are fantastic. She'd probably decimate, you know, any number of professional male tennis players and certainly every amateur player in the world. But I think she is humble enough and realistic enough to acknowledge that she would not fare well against the top male players unless they were completely, past their prime and their physicality had diminished as a result of it. So again, like this kind of stuff, I understand why it's popular in terms of, we're talking about it now. Everybody's going to be talking about it, I'm sure. And then whatever the outcome, it'll either be weaponized by men against women to say, oh, you see, he beat her. Or if he loses, to say, well, whatever, if she played against somebody better. And if she wins, it'll be, oh, look, women are just as good as men at tennis, which it would not be proving. So it just feels like the whole thing's kind of an invitation to more of the dialogue we don't need in the world, which is more of this girls against boys kind of thing. Look, any player in the WNBA is probably going to get demolished by a player in the NBA just because of the physical disadvantages and physical advantages of each of the genders. But to say that WNBA players aren't incredible athletes who are disciplined and focused compared to a woman who is not disciplined or focused, or compared to a man who just casually plays the sport, I think it's a disservice and disrespectful.
So we have a story here coming all the way across the pond in France. So we're going to be talking about HW versus France. Have you heard about this
France? Yes, I have heard about that.
So to give a background for both you and for the viewers watching at home. So all the way back in 2012, wow, I hate to say all the way back in 2012.
I know, that's weird. As you said it, I was like, ooh, it's true, but you don't say
right?
it like that.
Ooh. All the way back in 2012, a French woman going under the pseudonym here, HW, filed for divorce in 2019. Wow, talk about fast court system over there. 2019, the Versailles Court of Appeals granted the divorce, but found her solely at fault for refusing sex. Under French law, there's a concept called devoir conjugal, which I guess means marital duties, that both spouses have a marital duty to sex. But HW, not discouraged, took it all the way to the European Court of Human Rights.
Oof.
And had it overturned, saying that it is not it's not a duty. Like, she has autonomy and can say, I don't want to sleep with my husband for X amount of years. I don't have to do it. This devoir conjugal, it's nonsense. Get it out of here.
Sounds good. Almost everything sounds better when you say it in French. Like, do you wish to meet your devoir conjugal? Like, it sounds good. It sounds better than like, hey, you want to, get at it? Yeah. So what do I think about this? I assume you're telling me about it for that reason, not just so you can hear my abysmally bad French pronunciation. Yeah, this is actually not that new. In New York, up until about 8 years ago, we had a grounds for divorce before we became a no-fault state with the passage of Domestic Relations Law 170, subsection 7, which is irretrievable breakdown of the marital relationship, which is essentially no-fault divorce. Prior to that, and I've been practicing so long that I used to have to do grounds trials. It was kind of great. Like, when they passed no-fault divorce, it was actually bad for lawyers because it cut a whole phase of the divorce out where we used to have to prove grounds if there was a contested grounds proceeding. And sometimes you would just, litigants would just try to stop the other from getting the divorce on the grounds they wanted. So we would have grounds trials, and it was another 30, 40 grand worth of legal fees just because people wanted to argue over why they were getting divorced. The legislature figured out that this was probably not fun for anyone but the lawyers. So they got rid of it, which I think was very good. But, there was a grounds for divorce called constructive abandonment. And what that was the refusal to have sexual relations with your spouse for a period of at least 1 year without a physical incapacity to have sex. So we did divorces on that grounds. It actually led to a great story where I had a man who was leaving his wife for his mistress, and he filed for divorce against his wife, and he used the grounds of constructive abandonment because, how do you prove that someone didn't have sex with you despite you asking for sex and despite them having no physical incapacity that would render them unable to have sex with you? And so he filed on those grounds, as many people did at the time. And I remember her in the hallway of the court saying, I'll have sex with you right now. Let's go. Let's go. There's a broom closet. We go in there. We'll have sex right now. I am willing to have sex with you. You do not have this grounds. I will have sex with you if you want in the closet. And I thought, it'd be interesting if he called her bluff on that one. But we ended up settling the grounds in that case, as often we did. But many people do not know, even under New York state law, you have a legal obligation to have sex with your spouse at least once per year. I actually thought it was kind of funny if somebody would have it marked on the calendar. I had this image of it's Oh, that's next week. That they'd have the sort of like the looming or the clock, like you have a clock that would like the countdown to your, if you pass this day without having sex with me, despite any physical incapacity to the contrary, I'm going to have grounds for divorce. And maybe the person would like phone it in once a year. Look, it's interesting. I think there are so many laws on the books that are not enforced or enforceable. Adultery remains illegal in many states, but it's not been subject to criminal prosecution in many years. There's something called alienation of affection, which one judge in Texas a few years back tried to enforce, but it's very rarely enforced. There were states up until recently where sodomy, which was defined as even oral sex would fit into the definition legally of sodomy, was illegal. So, in a world where it's illegal to receive or give oral sex, that's just not a world you want to live in. But yeah, this is an interesting question, which is I certainly agree with this woman that people have bodily autonomy and agency and should not have to have sex with anyone they don't want to have sex with. I think that obviously it goes without saying that consent should be, continuing, enthusiastic, and clear. But it certainly begs the question, well, if you don't want to have sex with this person at least once a year, why in God's name are you married to them? It sounds like a good basis for a divorce. I can't imagine saying, no, I would like to stay married to this person. There's nothing physically wrong with either of us, but I don't want to have sex with that person even once a year. That seems sort of odd to me. Why would you remain married to them? Very often when we had grounds trials, it was because you were trying to preserve some asset or prevent someone from getting payments from your pension. You were trying to sort of, use like a procedural backdoor, no pun intended, to get away from your obligations attendant to a divorce. And that's why I think a lot of states switched to no-fault grounds, because it was really used as like a way to subterfuge people's actual substantive rights. I'm willing to bet if we look deeper into this case, there is a reason why he wanted to get the divorce. There's a reason why she wants to hold off the divorce. And it probably has nothing to do with the right or lack of right to have sex. It probably has to do with wanting to prevent the divorce action from happening, so some asset or assets are not divided, or some rights or obligations that either of them is entitled to don't occur. So I think you got to dig a little deeper on that one. But I think you should have a legal right to not have sex with people. I think that's a right I'm fairly comfortable with and exercise pretty freely every day. There's so many people I don't have sex with on a daily basis or even yearly basis. And I like having that right.
So our story here, 50% of Gen Z last month spent $0 on dating. People are saying, are we in a dating recession? Is this because of a recession, or is this a dating recession?
It just could be that Gen Z is like broke as a joke right now, It could just be that they're just like, dude, I'm just trying to get by and get my meals, or they burnt it all on Sweetgreen. I don't know. Y'all have some expensive taste. Like all the guys spent it on Zins. I don't know. It could have been any number of things, but yeah. So I don't think people, again, and I'm not part of that generation. I haven't had a lot of exposure to it, except insofar as people who work for me or maybe are in my orbit are part of it. But from what I understand, dating isn't so much of a thing anymore. Like having someone ask you out on a date and then you go on a date and, you spend money on that date. I think people go from the talking stage, I believe that's what you guys call it, where you're texting or maybe you're communicating or FaceTiming, whatever it is y'all do. Maybe there's a progression where you lead to that. And then you just go right to the hooking up part. And maybe there's no going on dates. I don't know. That's foreign to me. I was of a generation and raised in a manner that you ask someone out and then you spend some time with them and you spend money on them. If you're a man, you traditionally would pay for the date. And perhaps you might not take a person on a lavish first date. You might take them on something more modest on a first date, and then maybe you want to, unless you're trying to impress them with your wealth or whatever it might be. That was never a problem for me because I was always broke. So I understand that may be a function of how we approach dating and less of an economic thing, although I think these are difficult economic times for young people. I think people are really trying to meet their basic necessities, and their student loans are out of control. Housing costs are out of control. I think insurance costs are out of control. It's a difficult time to be a young person when you're at that lower earning capacity, and maybe you're a student. I think that that's a very unfortunate reality, but one of the first things that might be on the chopping block are non-necessities. And the question is taking someone on a date a necessity? There is a more charitable way of viewing this, and that is that perhaps people are still going on dates, but they're going on dates that don't require a financial investment, which I think can be very charming. I think there's something to be said. I happen to live in New York, so I think walking around the city together or going to one of the many museums where it's on a donation basis, or just having time together at any of the amazing things you can do in whatever city you live in. There's always lots of free, fun things to do. I mean, literally, I could hang out by a dog park and just watch dogs play with each other for hours, or just walking and talking. I think that, when I was a college student and dating, including dating your mother, I was broke. And so my favorite dates were you could smoke indoors back then. And I was a smoker and she was a smoker. So I would always say, oh, let's go to the diner. And we would sit in the diner and we would just get a cup of coffee, which, costs like less than $1 at the time. And we would sit there and smoke cigarettes and drink coffee for, a couple of hours.
Oh, God, we used to be a proper country.
Yeah, it was great. I'd say like that is actually something that I feel like people are poorer for not having. Maybe not like the secondhand smoke and the lung cancer, but
that's the part we got to bring back is the
secondhand smoke and the lung
being
cancer.
able to smoke in a diner. You have any idea?
It was the best.
That sounds amazing.
It was the best. We really, that was my favorite dates with anyone in college. I mean, it was all I could afford was to do something like that, but it was always a date that women were interested in because I like to talk, if you haven't figured that out, and I like to learn about a person that I'm romantically interested in. And so we would just, sit and talk, and we didn't really have money to do other things. If it was wintertime on the East Coast, it was cold, so you couldn't go for a walk. So we would just sit, smoke cigarettes, drink coffee, talk. And that was a really great way to get to know somebody. Even now, like saying to someone, oh, do you want to go meet for a drink? Drinks are $20, $25 depending on the bar that you go to or what it is you're drinking. So there really aren't good, cheap dates anymore. Even when I was a young man, taking a woman to the movies, by the time you were finished, it was a fairly significant financial investment. Now it's, I think, well beyond anything. It's like an order of magnitude higher. So I think there is some value in putting together dates where people are like genuinely connecting to each other and putting their phones down and kind of focusing on each other. And what you do isn't as important as the manner you're engaged with your date during that time, I think. So, I don't know what this is tied to. I hope that we are on a directional curve again where the idea of courtship and dating is coming back. All of the young women that I'm friends with, I shouldn't even say young women I'm friends with, all the women I'm friends with who are single are all sort of lamenting the fact that courtship has kind of disappeared and the concept of a man sort of pursuing a woman in some way is missing. And I think there was something really fun about that for both sides. There was something really fun about the idea of trying to put your best foot forward and trying to, have this process whereby you slowly get to know each other before you dive into bed. And I think that there was some value in that. So I hope that this is a sign that maybe we're going to start turning towards that direction again. And hopefully we can improve the wage conditions of Gen Z so that they can go out there and, court each other and get laid.
So I would love to know, and I imagine a lot of the young fellas watching, I actually don't know our audience spread, but for the young
We're like
fellas.
50-50, which is weird. Everybody scratches their head when they look at our numbers and they're like, wow, how are you 50-50? Because it's very odd. I'm equally popular or unpopular with men and women.
Okay, well, so for half of the audience, I think we would all love to know. So let's say you were let's say you were me.
Say I was young.
Yeah, let's say you were me, you're 26 or whatever, right? You're
I vaguely remember it. Yeah.
I think I was already on the way.
You were already
when
born.
You were
Yeah, you were born when I was 26. Your brother had been there for a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So let's say you're young. what's your advice here? What do you think young men should be taking out, first date? What should that be?
I don't think a first date should be like a Sally showstopper. I think a first date, even if you're a person of means, I think a first date should be something where it's casual. You both have the ability to sort of get out of it if either of you doesn't feel the connection. I don't think you should lead with wealth. Just like I don't know that you should lead with sex. I think that you should lead with some genuine way to connect. If you're the kind of person that is comfortable with your conversational skills and the conversational skills of the other person, then, maybe someplace where you can really engage in conversation, which isn't always like a crowded restaurant or something like that, or a movie. I think if you are the kind of person that isn't as sure in your conversational skills, maybe an activity is a better way to go, like something where you're both watching something or where you're both engaged in some activity and there can be some conversation. I think you really have to play into whatever your strengths are. If you're someone who's good at conversation and the person who you're taking out is someone who's also good at it, then play into your strengths. If you're someone who's not, you get uncomfortable, you're awkward in your communication skills, you get nervous, whatever it might be, then I think, maybe play into that, play into something where you're doing an activity. I don't think it should be anything too self-centered. So there's a phase, I think, early in a relationship where you want to expose a person to things you're passionate about that they may not be. And I also don't know that it needs to be like picking up on something they're interested in, and trying to be to service of that. Although I think that's a very romantic concept. Like if, this person is very into horses, for example, and, that there's like a farm or a ranch that does like horse rescue. Maybe you want to take the person because you say, oh, I knew you were into horses. I think there's something romantic about considering the needs of the other. And I'm from a generation where, it was the man's job to try to figure that out and to try to, make decisions and be decisive. I think what I hear a lot from women, single women, is that they want men to be decisive and clear without being overly dominating and overly self-centered. So, make decisions, pick a restaurant, but don't pick the restaurant that you necessarily want to pick the restaurant that you think she would like, and be decisive about it in some fashion. I think the way you choose your dates, like to set them up and structure them, says something about the kind of partner you want to be. So I think it should be an authentic representation of who you are. Play into your strengths. I don't think you should ever, even if you're a wealthy person, I just don't think that trying to like blow someone away with grand gestures, because where the hell do you have to go from there? If you're like, okay, well, the driver's going to pick you up and we're going to go to this Michelin-starred restaurant. Sure, I'm sure she's going to be like, wow, that was really impressive. But where do you really go from there? Like where are you going to go except private jets? I think your age group, people don't expect you to be wealthy, but they expect you to be paying attention. They want your attention. I think that if I've learned anything about women in my adult life, it's they would rather have 2 hours of your focused, undivided attention than 4 hours of you completely distracted and half on your phone and things like that. I think that focus and attention and interest is a big piece of what you're looking for when you're dating. So I would encourage you to find date activities that make your date feel seen, interesting and interested, and that you're trying to attend to their needs, because that's really what you're doing. It's an audition for each of you as to how will this person have their needs met by me and how will this person meet my needs. And I think, like I said, love is an economy. And I think in an economy, you want to identify what each of you is bringing to the transaction and what value it has. You don't have to bring the same things. Ideally, you don't ever bring all the same things, or else why the hell you even need to date each other. But you want to show the value that you bring and the value you expect, both of you. And I think that try to create dates and activities that feed into that.
So a little preface on it. Have you seen The Materialist movie that came out recently?
No.
It's a very big movie. It's kind of
I know what it's about. This is the one with Pedro Pascal and Dakota Johnson.
The very recent heartthrob who's a little old for a teen heartthrob right now, but people love him, Pedro Pascal. Good looking dude.
People like Pedro Pascal.
He's a good looking dude.
I think he's I find him kind of annoying, but yeah.
Well, that's attractive to some women.
Yeah.
So that movie, it's an A24 movie,
that is in itself a genre. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the thing. So dating app Field basically had an interview with The Guardian and said that mentions of A24, the studio, their films, that kind of stuff, is up 65% in male dating profiles.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised by this. It's actually become a term. Like, Xerox is the name of a company, but people would say, like, oh, can you make me a Xerox of this? Like, meaning a copy of it. Or do you want to go to Starbucks? Like, often people just meant you want to get coffee. But a brand becomes like indicative of a thing, or like, oh, I'll Google it. Like, it may not be that you were actually using Google. So yeah, I think an A24 film, like if you said to me like, oh, he's like an A24 type of person, or like, oh, she's like into A24 films, like I know exactly what you mean. It's an art house kind of a film. It has like it's almost like a foreign film in that it's very character driven. It's not like CGI effects. It's, it has like a foreign film vibe to it. So I get it. I mean, I think that actually, I like things that are shorthand. Like if somebody says, oh, I'm a dog person. Okay, well, that tells me a bunch of things about you. Like if you say, oh, I'm like an A24 film kind of person, that means you're probably not going to want to go see the new Avengers movie when it comes out, which again, like I don't think one is superior to the other or inferior to the other. It's just are you the kind of person that likes this? Or are you the kind of person that likes this? Dog people can marry cat people. I think A24 film people versus Marvel Cinematic Universe people, they could still merge, and there are certainly people that enjoy both. I actually would count myself among them. So I think but it is useful shorthand. I think in dating profiles, you're trying to say as much as you can about yourself in such a small space that you come up with all kinds of weird little shorthands,
Well, people would love to know. I don't know if we have the budget for proper animation on this. Well, maybe next season, but we would love to have you build here. What's James Sexton's dating profile? The ideal dating
I'm not
profile.
Touching that. That would have to be a whole. God, you know what? That'll be a future assignment. We could do that as a future assignment, because I find like which pictures you would choose and like how you would describe yourself. And yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And I actually, is a funny story, when your mom and I divorced, we were still quite young, and we were still friendly. And your mom had me help her with her, what was it called back then? It was like the one that people that actually wanted to like date, not just sleep with each other. I don't remember.
Match? It wasn't Match.com?
Maybe it was Match.com. Yes, it was Match.com. And then there was another one that was like, oh, you're kind of more serious. And yes, but Match.com was one of them. And she wanted me to help her with her Match.com profile. And I actually thought, having your ex-spouse help you with your Match.com profile, if you have that kind of friendly relationship, is pretty good, because they could like tell you like, yeah, here's what you should or shouldn't, like here's how, because the way you view yourself and the way that someone who's with you would view you are very different. But I remember I sort of was like, oh yeah, that's a good picture of you, or oh yeah, I would maybe mention this. And then I remember telling my therapist about it at the time, and him looking at me and being like, yeah, there's 8 billion people in the world, and literally every single one of them is more qualified than you to help her do her Match.com profile. So I'd already done it at that point. But yeah, I guess it was ill-advised from a mental health standpoint.
Well, I don't know how she met her current husband, but maybe...
They went to the prom together.
Oh, so so I guess it didn't help.
They were high school sweethearts, then they both married, had kids, both divorced, and then they found each other and have been married for many, many years, very successful.
Oh, I think I remember hearing about that. They re-linked up on LinkedIn. So big shout out to
somewhere. Yeah, apps get involved somehow.
So shout out to LinkedIn, I guess.
Shout out to LinkedIn and that circumstance.
That's the social media.
LinkedIn may actually be a great way to meet prospective romantic partners. You're finding out a lot about their professional life and sort of their educational history. It might be a good place to do that if those are kinds of things that are important to you. Time for our viewer submission. Remember, go to sextonshow.com. Send us love mail, hate mail, questions, topics you want us to cover in future episodes. We read all of it, and we definitely take it into consideration. And if you have something interesting or insane to say, it may be something that we choose, like today. Go ahead. Jim, my nephew, 41, has 2 children with his girlfriend, aged 1 and 3. Okay, his girlfriend's not aged 1 and 3.
It's
okay, I was going to say, because that's a felony in every jurisdiction. My nephew, 41, has 2 children with his girlfriend, aged 1 and 3. I am not convinced that he's the father. He may not be the father. The kids share no resemblance of him, and he only knew his girlfriend 6 months before she got pregnant with the first. He thinks he needs to get a paternity test. How do I bring this up? Do I just mind my own business? He pays child support and sees the kids on weekends. He says the plan is for them to all live together, but the girlfriend says she does not want to share a home with him now, so they live separately. Okay, so wow, interesting question. I guess what I would say is there's a bunch of ways to do this. There's the above board way of doing it and then the covert way of doing it. If he spends time with these children, you can do a home paternity test very easily. You can get them at any drugstore. It's a cheek swab. It's not a blood test. So it's basically like brushing your teeth. You're just brushing the cheek of the kid and brushing your cheek. And then you send it in and they'll come back and tell you with a very high degree of certainty if you have any genetic link to this child. So that would be the covert way of doing it. Or you could do it, I guess, theoretically, if you're the uncle, you could theoretically do it without him knowing, take the kids, like when you have the kids alone, you'd be like, oh, we're doing like 21andMe or whatever those, those genetic things are. I don't know. Those are covert ways of doing it. Above board, maybe just express the concern to him. I know it's something he might not want to hear, but if you're having that concern, it might be a concern that he's having as well. I'm kind of a fan of radical candor in these kinds of situations. The other way to look at this is, look, if he has decided that a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old are his children and he is proceeding accordingly, he may very much want to not know. If in fact it's not true. Although, again, in the future, that could be very painful for him if it turns out they're not his children. Thankfully, most states have now created the ability, and this is largely thanks to same-sex couples, where you do not have to be the biological parent of a child in order to have visitation with the child in the event that you and the other parents split up. I remember having a case about 17, 18 years ago where I represented one half of a lesbian couple where they had 2 children who were ages like 7 and 9, and they'd raised them as their children, even though the other spouse, not my client, and they weren't married because the marriage equality hadn't happened yet. And what happened is they were splitting up. They were no longer cohabitating, and the parent who was biologically related, she'd carried the babies and they'd had a sperm donor. She basically said, yeah, you're a legal stranger to this child, meaning you have no standing with which to bring a visitation proceeding. And unfortunately, the court agreed. The court said, actually in the decision, the court said, this is a very unfortunate result, but it is a legally correct one. Thankfully, the law was changed in New York, in part as a result of that case going up to the Court of Appeals. But it took quite a bit of time for it to get through the machinery of it. Most states now have some form of visitation or access rights to someone who has been deeply involved in the life of a child for an extended period of time. It's not the same thing as parental rights, but it's like a quasi-parental right. So there's an argument to be made that you may not want to broach this subject with him now, but just know that in the future it could create some legal impediments to him having the kinds of access and rights that he wants to have with these children if in fact they're not married and there was no biological tie to the children, although it may not completely impede his ability to have access to them. So it's a conundrum. Just the fact the kids don't look like him though, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Like very often, children don't resemble one or both of their parents. I think that that's a pretty common thing. Sometimes they look like your great grandmother and you just don't know it because you never met her. But I wouldn't hang too much on that one. But again, covert and overt ways of handling it. Good luck. All right, for those of you new to the show, this is a Sexton-ism. Sexton-isms are things that I say so frequently to my clients that my staff hears me say it over and over every day. It's largely because we deal with some of the same legal issues all the time, so I tend to give some of the same advice because it's the best advice that I have to give. But I tend to repeat myself to the point where my staff says, oh, there's another Sexton-ism. And until there's a book, here is your Sexton-ism of the day. Anticipate, don't improvise. I am a big fan of strategy. I'm a big fan of planning. As it says in Sun Tzu's The Art of War, strategy without action is nothing, but action without strategy is the noise before defeat. It's important to think strategically. It's important to think with a plan in mind. It's important to have your end in mind when you're making decisions about something. Don't just improvise. So something I frequently say in today's Sexton-ism is anticipate, don't improvise. Thanks for joining us today for another Better Call Sexton. Remember, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all those wonderful things. We are adjourned.